Okay, I should be live now. Let me know if there's an issue with the sound. Perfect, it looks like it is showing up. So, thank you for joining me on this live stream. I know I've been really not doing the videos lately. There's been so much energy to process lately that it's been really hard to have the energy to do the videos like I normally have been doing, and I'm hoping that I'm gonna get back into the habit. But a lot of amazing things have been happening for me, and I see them happening to the people around me. I'm in the Absolutely Everything Pass that Kyle Cease does, and so there's an amazing community of people there that I get support from, and I see them going through similar things where they're struggling with these really deep, heavy emotions. And while all of us are used to going through that kind of thing, it's really been at a new level and intensity lately. So I called this the collective awakening process. So I'm talking about how really we're all going through this, and we've been going through this for a while. This is not a new concept, but for me, this feels like this is really go time. This is where we got the pedal to the metal, and I'm really starting to see this show up in my life. Like, sure, I've known all these spiritual concepts, but seeing them work out in my life real time, it's a totally different thing. It's like, wow, this is actually real, and I'm experiencing this and I'm seeing this. So this is what is bringing this to the next level for me now. So, and I also said, I mentioned twin flames there, the role of twin flames there. So I've made a video earlier, several months ago, and it was talking about twin flame bullshit. And when I said twin flame bullshit, what I really meant is all the bullshit around twin flames. And I didn't mean that twin flames are bullshit, because it's a really interesting concept and idea, and people resonate with it and experience it in their lives. And it has really powerful practical applications, and we're going to talk about and discuss that here. Okay, so really starting in September, I experienced a new level of this deep emotional heaviness, and it reminded me of years and years ago when I was really, really struggling. So I had really, really dark thoughts and emotional heaviness. My life felt bleak and purposeless, and it hadn't felt like that leading up to this point. Like, I'd felt fairly emotionally stable, had been building up my endurance to be able to manage my job and do the videos and process all the emotions that were coming up. And emotions would come up regularly, like probably once every 2 weeks there would be this deep emotional thing that would come up, might be triggered by something in my life, and I would work through and process it. So this was normal, and I had enough confidence to know when this happened that I would be able to go through it and process it. But this was so intense and at such a deep level that it fooled me into thinking, oh wait, I really am at this level. I'm experiencing this emotional heaviness that's coming up, but it's really this debris. It's this past emotional debris from a past point in my life that's coming up to be completely purified, completely cleared out. It doesn't mean that at that point I am back where I went back from the beginning. And there were thoughts that I was experiencing that were saying that you haven't made any progress in all of these years. And of course, that's not true. We know it's not true. But when you're in that emotional heaviness, it can feel so heavy and so dark that you think that that's where you are, and you identify with that thoughts, and you identify with the emotional heaviness. And that's a deception. And if you've been working on transmuting your emotions, being able to work through these different lessons, these different energies that you have to process through your body, and this is not something new to you, then you know that you've developed these skills, you've become masterful at it, and you can see the connection with the spiritual journey, that this is part of what you're going through. It's always hard. It's always really hard in the moment where you're faced up against that, because if we're completely honest, everything you've done up to your life to this point has been a trial. It's been building you up. It's been a challenge which has been training you for the next thing. And I noticed that in my life. Earlier, when I was going through the severe clinical depression, I had some spiritual awareness. And I thought, what is coming in my life that this is preparing me for? And of course, we go into moments of clarity, moments of awareness where we realize, yeah, I know what's going on here, but then we also doubt that. So while I think a lot of us are familiar with going through this heaviness and learning how to process it and having that awareness and knowledge of knowing how to process it, we can still come up to points in our lives where we think, why am I going through this? And in that moment of challenge, we are in that darkness. We are in the dark tunnel, not having gotten to the light part yet. And we doubt ourselves. We doubt the purpose. We doubt the beauty, the absolute beauty and magnificence of who we are and what we're doing in our lives. And we can think, well, I'm going to compare myself to so-and-so and judge myself, or compare to myself to where I could have been. And I've had these thoughts lately, if I hadn't gone through all these trials and struggles, then just imagine where I would have been in my life. Look, imagine how successful I would have been. So I did mention a little bit 3D and 5D paradigm. So the actual words themselves are not meaningful until we apply meaning to them. So the meaning that we apply to them is basically how we understand them. So 3D, we can just say, this is the world that we live in, and this is related to achievement. My life is about achievement and success, about fulfilling the desires of the ego, about fitting into the current paradigms. And that's something interesting about twin flames. When you're going through that process, it challenges the current paradigm of relationship. I'm going to talk about that more later, but just as a sneak peek, I will say that main challenge is, just because you feel that intense attraction to someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're destined to be with them or you have to be with them. You always have the choice, and that is the lack and limitation where you have that belief where I could only ever feel this incredible, amazing connection with this person. But the expanded awareness says, no, actually, you could feel this connection with multiple people. And maybe in your past experience, you've never felt that level of connection before, but that connection is always available to you, whether just within yourself or that connection is available to you through other people. Just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it's not going to happen at greater frequencies and to greater degrees in the future. And this is really what the collective awakening process is about. We're not here on this journey alone. We're traveling with other people. And this is the really exciting part. So the dark thoughts, the emotional heaviness, that it's really the camel going through the eye of the needle. It's that pressure point, it's that squeeze. It can be that final point of testing. And why is this so important? You have to think of it in terms of, an Olympic athlete. I used to train cross-country skiing. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I never made it. I went through severe clinical depression instead. And in the context of what we're talking about, that was far more valuable an experience, but it's something that we invalidate because we see people with this external success and we say, you know what, that's so valuable. What I'm going through and the skills that I've developed aren't valuable. But regardless, if we want to say that's valuable, we still have to look at it and see how the person who is an Olympic athlete is a completely different person than the person who wins a gold at the BC Champs or a gold at a provincial championships. So if you go through that process of developing yourself, developing that focus, and competing in sports at a really high level, it can be really mentally and emotionally challenging. And in a sense, it is like going through that eye of the needle. There are going to be points where you doubt yourself. How good you are, you're still going to have moments where you struggle. I'm going to use an example because I used to do cross-country skiing. In cross-country skiing, the Norwegian team tends to dominate. We've got the Swedish, the Norwegian, US tends to do quite well, and the Canadians not so much. There was one year where the Canadians just racked up the medals, and compared to how they normally do. And I heard through the grapevine that the next year they tried to train harder and their results were worse. So working harder doesn't give you better results. And we know this through our spiritual knowledge, but that principle is still demonstrated through sports. It's something very physical, but there is that mental and emotional challenge, and it can become something quite spiritual as well if through sports, through that intense exertion, you get moments of intense focus where, like, I've had an experience where I've left my body during a race, and it was this peak performance of focus where I was watching myself, watching the body, and I won the race, but I came back into the body, but it felt like I didn't win it. So there was that dissociation with that I, with that small identity. So even though you don't get external validation from all the work that you're doing, it's important to realize that you are still that Olympic champion, and this small validation that we can give each other is us standing on the podium, listening to the national anthem, receiving our medal. And where it's not quite like, of course, you know, in the future, likely there's going to be moments where we're going to have greater realizations of that. But recognize right now the work that you're doing, it's at that level. You know, it's only possible that you could be used to winning Olympic gold medals, and you could walk into the ceremony with a bad attitude and not appreciate it and enjoy it. So wherever you can, be thankful and know that incredible things are coming through this journey. Okay, so we're talking about spiritual awakening. So there's a spiritual journey, and I've heard the term spiritual awakening, which was confusing because when is the exact point at which it happens? And maybe you can have multiple, and how do you know, right? You can have an awareness of spirituality and yourself as having this spiritual self, but that moment of awakening isn't always clear, and it can be a continual process. So we've got the purification and awakening process, transforming pain into love and new levels of awareness. So this is really where the beauty of it comes. So the previous slide were the challenges, and this is where the beauty of the process comes into play. So in general, for a spiritual awakening, there is going to be deeper levels of awareness of where you start to see yourself as more than just your body. You start to see yourself as a being that continues on after you die. So after the body dies. And that you have this eternal nature to you. So the consequence of that means that not everything on earth in this life, you don't have to take it as seriously. It does not diminish the experience to any degree, because you still feel the intensity of it. And even, in fact, as you go through a spiritual awakening process, you start to feel the intensity even more, because you stop distracting yourself, you stop numbing, you stop repressing, or at least the journey is going to force you to really face all those repressed or suppressed feelings. It's going to force you to be able to process those emotions and sensations within the body even better, whether that's any kind of trauma or anything from childhood. It can also be collective thought paradigms, collective pain. So it can be from your ancestral line, or these blocks or obstructions or limitations within the collective consciousness that you can be working through and healing as well. And of course, this is going to be related to your life in some way, because there's going to be that triggering of that for you. So while we are all dealing with our own issues, we are also all working together. This awareness, where you have this awareness of yourself being more than just the body. So we know we've got this intellectual part of ourselves, this emotional part of ourselves, but then there's something beyond that that we can sense. We can sense this lightness and this darkness around us in situations, in places, in other people. And part of this growing awareness is starting to see the beauty in the experience when you can feel this incredible joy and peace and love within yourself. It completely transforms your experience of life. Your life can go from being very humdrum and boring to very magical. And your experience, your paradigm, that's what's changed. And I mean, we're not going to get into the mechanics. I can't really explain really how this happens, but how I like to think about it is that if we have this change in our reality, it could be localized within us. So we can have pockets where we have peace and joy and love, where we're radiating these energies outwards by transmuting whatever is around us, and we're creating this local environment for us to experience. So we've got this awareness of our spiritual being and our spiritual body. And one more thing that I'll say about this is the inherent beauty you can have. So people can develop their spiritual self and become these radiant, gorgeous beings where their divine nature is shining through them, and they're so magnetic. And this, when I was in university, I was reading about this and learning about this for the first time, and I said to a friend, like, I want to become the most beautiful woman alive, and I meant by doing this spiritual practice and transforming myself from within. And it's funny now because you have different motives for why you do something. I was really enamored by what I was learning at the time. But there really is this beauty that emanates from within as you develop it. So there is that level of awareness, and you can start to have different experiences, different non-dual experiences. So I'm not going to get too much into that, and I've experienced that a little bit in the past year, where it shows up and it's really kind of strange. Like, I start perceiving the world very differently than I have before. And I have some videos of myself where I recorded myself talking in these states, and usually what happens is I kind of come back and settle into a new normal where I've integrated some of that state where I was in, but I come back into my normal life with my job and everything else that I do in my life. And these experiences, they create these subtle, small changes. So that's the awareness part of your spiritual self. And then, of course, we have the paradigms of spirituality where we learn about things, but then there's the practical day-to-day experience. And the practical day-to-day experience is often quite a lot more subtle, right? If you're going to have signs and symptoms of awakening, then they could also look like something that you just need some extra rest or need to go to the doctor. Maybe you got sick. So these things can overlap. So there's this level of where you are immersed in the physical plane and being practical about your life, but also have this spiritual awareness. So then we've got the purification process where we transform pain. So for me, this really started probably close to 10 years ago when I was even before I was first diagnosed with severe clinical depression, because there had to be some buildup before I got to that point. And that was really painful, and it really took years. And then this ability to transmute pain and transform pain, those painful emotions, sensations within the body, that really ramped up within the past year. So this is a really the difficult part of it, that purification process. And oftentimes you want to escape the body because it's so uncomfortable. You want to go spiritualize it away, don't want to deal with the issues in your life. And I've felt that for sure, and I persevered through. For example, I would have like existential crises while going to university, and to the point where I wasn't able to write my exams or study for my exams because I wasn't sure whether I existed or not. Because if I didn't exist, then I didn't need to study. There was no point in studying for an exam because there was no I. This happens so often, and then I'd show up at the exam and be so stressed because I didn't study. And I had this self-judgment, well, why didn't you study? Like, it seems like such a simple, obvious thing, but this is part of the process that I went through, and this has been the struggle, right? This goes back to what we said before about there being this challenge and blaming yourself for what you're going through. So a lot of these like struggles that you're going through, processing emotions, and so that's really being comfortable with feeling whatever you're feeling. And what often stops us from feeling whatever we're feeling is the judgments in our mind. And we listen to the thoughts that come up and we automatically assume they're true. And that's where the new level of awareness comes in, where you can start to pinpoint and realize, oh, no, I don't need to distract or avoid what I'm feeling. And there you can release judgment because there can be this automatic thought that comes up that judges the pain that you're feeling and thinks it as something bad, because of course that is the paradigm that we're kind of conditioned to, is assuming that we need to avoid anything painful for this sense of self-survival. So those thoughts come up, and we can start to see those thoughts with love and compassion, and start to see ourselves with a lot more love and compassion, and realize it's okay, we're not going to die if we feel through this. It's okay if we take some extra time to process and feel what we're feeling. And then there's those processes of ego deaths, and you can go through multiple of those. They can be smaller, they can be bigger, they can feel terrifying and really scary. And I've had this where it's happened and I thought, I need to stop this spiritual stuff, it's messing up my life. And then I worked through it and I realized, oh, this is what they talk about. And this is what happens. And for me, I'll give it a quick example. One thing that happened was I was mountain biking. I was living on the resort, and I went to get something fixed with my bike, and I was biking up to where I was living, and I was anxious about the cost of the fix being too much. And this was stemming from a judgment that my mom always had about spending money. And there was this strong attachment and fear about spending money. There was this anxiety that it's going to cost too much and they're going to charge way too much for what I want to get fixed with my bike. It ended up not being expensive at all. Most of what the small fixes that they did, they didn't even charge me for, and I even got a discount. And it turned out to not be any kind of issue at all, but I went through this really intense fear and anxiety, and it felt like I was dying, even though logically, you're not dying. I was in my room. I couldn't sleep all night, took the next day off work to work through and process that. And that was one of the things that was triggered within me that resulted in an ego death. And it seems kind of ridiculous and silly, but when you're experiencing and feeling those kind of things, it's not silly. It's serious, not as serious as it seems, but it's one of those points where it's one of those critical points where we need to go through them in order to progress. And of course, we're going to get whatever help we need at that moment. So that happened right after when I joined the Absolutely Everything Pass that Kyle Cease does. And that I was thinking, I need to, why am I paying for this to happen to me? But it's funny because the ego hates it, but this is part of the process. And this is part of what our higher self is guiding us to do. When I signed up, I had no intentions of doing it. And I found myself signing up and paying for it and thinking, what did I do? There was this split part of me that was not on board with this. Of course, now I am on board with it because I can see the immense growth that has happened for me. So you're going to get guidance and direction, and you don't even know that you're getting guidance and direction to help you along the process and along the path that you're going. It can be strange, it can be scary because you are navigating your own path. Okay, so I talked about the spiritual journey and awareness of your spiritual self, the purification process, this transforming pain, and of course you're getting new levels of awareness. What happened for me in terms of these new levels of awareness, I tended to journal a lot, and I would journal through my thoughts, and this is something that helped me quite a bit. Part of my increase in awareness was starting to recognize thoughts that I had which weren't true. And as I started to recognize those thoughts more and recognized they weren't true, I stopped believing them and stopped being a slave to those thoughts. I'm going to give a really simple example for this. One of those things is probably like an addiction where I would probably watch like movies, shows before bed, and it was this kind of addictive thing. You get some dopamine from it, and it was this pattern. And before bed, my mind would say, it's fine, I'm not going to spend that much time before bed. Even though I always did, I always spent way too much time, became really exhausted the next day, and would have this cycle going on and on. Looking back, I realized that I had a lot of emotions that I wasn't even consciously aware of, that hadn't been processed. When I went to bed, they would come up and I would feel this discomfort and would avoid and distract myself from these emotions by watching these shows. And that's why it became such an addictive thing. So I started to recognize that thought, yeah, it's only not gonna take that long. I'm not gonna take that long watching these shows, even though it would take hours, which was really destructive to my life at the time. So recognizing that, you know what, that's a lie. Even though most of the time I would just go on with it, go along with this lie. Recognizing that thought is a lie helped me to be realistic with myself and realize, you know what, no, I'm not only going to take a short time with this, it's going to take me hours. I'm not going to get the sleep that I need, and I'm not going to be able to do what I want in my life and stay healthy. And so that's how something so subtle, just being able to recognize the lies in the thoughts that we experience, that we kind of automatically identify with as, yeah, like that's what my mind or my voice is saying to me, even though it's just a thought, it can be just a thought pattern, then that can provide freedom. So this can be really transformational because you start to recognize thoughts. I'm ugly. So this is an important one because you have the thought, I'm ugly, and you assume it's true. You assume it's true. There's this automatic process that assumes that's true. It's not. Newsflash, it's not. And guess what? The mind can come up with all these reasons. Oh yeah, it's true. But when you have that thought can come from a very distorted perception. And this is part of the spiritual awakening, because as you start to recognize that you're not just a body, you're also a spirit. Is your spiritual self ugly? If you've been putting in the work to your spirit, you better believe your spirit is gorgeous. Like, your spirit, it's not limited to how your physical body looks. So if you have this thought, reoccurring thought, I'm ugly, this thought is so prevalent within our current collective consciousness. So many people experience this so often and never challenge it. If you can notice, is that true? And you question it, it no longer has power over you. This is such a subtle thing. And it's not a matter of resisting the thought and saying, no, I'm beautiful. You don't even need to do that. You can just have that awareness to recognize that thought when it shows up. This is really hard to do, but this comes with higher and higher levels of awareness that you develop through the spiritual awakening process. And this can transform your life, especially your experience of your life, which we mentioned earlier, that your perception and your experience of your life changes everything. Okay, so starting September, I felt this really deep, dark thoughts. I would drive home from work, and I made a video about this, I think, that I posted a while ago, where I drove home from work and everything just seemed so grayscale, so flat, so lifeless, so devoid of light. And this was a shift in consciousness where I was seeing the world around me as an illusion. I was thinking like, oh, we're supposed to work so hard to achieve what, to like feel amazing about what? Like, this reality felt so lifeless and dead. So this was part of me experiencing and seeing the illusion of the world around me. It was detaching from the paradigms of work hard, date, get married, have kids. I didn't realize how entrenched these paradigms were. And a lot of this is really focused on the future, focused on the past, not focused on the present. So part of these paradigms, they'll have collective thought patterns which take you away from the present moment. I need to worry and be anxious about the future and avoid being in the present moment. So this is part of the shift from 3D to 5D. I'm using the words 3D and 5D very loosely, and what I might as well explain what I mean by that right now. By 3D, I mean this current reality, this current paradigm, and 5D, shifting out of, and this is a lot of what Sonia Shokat's video that I linked. I'll add the links to the videos related to this video in the comments for this video, but I did another post earlier with links that are relevant. So there's a lot that I'm not talking about here that you can get information through those links that I will post. So Sonia Shokat, she was talking about, we're moving into a different dimension of what we experience, where we're moving out of doubt, out of fear, out of worry, out of separation consciousness into love, unity, peace, abundance, where we're moving out of lack into abundance. So there has to be this detachment and separation from the current paradigms and reality. So this can be paradigms, beliefs, ways of being, which we think of primarily as conceptual. And then there's also physical changes that occur as well. I think there's another video that I'll post that's really heavy on those kind of physical changes. But you can feel there is a definite physical change when you move out of worry and doubt and fear and into love, because guess what? It starts to stimulate your body's natural pharmacy, which produces a lot of the great chemicals naturally within your body that promote your own health and healing. So this is not just a non-physical thing, it very much affects the physical. And part of that transmutation of pain that I mentioned before is that process where you're transmuting that pain at a physical level in your body, because emotions are stored in the body. At a physical level in your body, that pain is transmuted. And so you're transmuting it spiritually, but also physically. It's really intertwined. So in September, I was starting to experience reality differently. And this was a very stark contrast as to how I experienced the world around me. And since then, it's kind of leveled out. So, and I felt that detachment to the world that I saw. And I felt this lack of purpose. Why would I keep working and striving towards what we think as achievements in this world. It seems pointless, it seems useless, and I can never get there. This is likely very familiar. A lot of people are experiencing this, the feeling no hope for the future, right? Because we're looking at the 3D world around us and we don't see any hope for our future. This can show up in smaller ways as well as larger ways. This can feel crushing, demoralizing. And in a sense, this is another kind of ego death because it feels like the end. But you have to go through this ending of this releasing this attachment to these paradigms where I need to achieve, I need to do this and this and this. And they feel that drive to do it, releasing that attachment to all of that. And of course, this process is happening naturally. External situations are really making it move forward. This feels very scary. What do we know life to be like without this? What does life look like? We don't know. So it's entering that dark tunnel. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is the magic and mystery of spiritual work. We often don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sure, we can see other people who can talk about it, and maybe we can learn through their experiences. But going through it yourself, it's so challenging because this is not something that is black and white. As you go through this experience yourself, you're going to have new insights, new lessons, and new ways of explaining and sharing your own experience. So detachment to the seen reality, which has been described as that Maya, that illusion. If you've heard about non-dual speakers, they talk about we're living in a dream, or enlightened speakers, we're living in a dream. And this can come up, maybe you're like, I don't know, it seems pretty real to me. Yeah, the emotions, the experiences, the sensations, you experience all of that as real. And a lot of this is around there are some people who do have the physical environment break down. I've talked to some people who've experienced that, where they go through that in the process, and that can be very challenging, very difficult to integrate back in. But a lot of this can happen for you where the beliefs and paradigms and structures of thought disintegrate. And part of, let's say, becoming enlightened is experiencing reality directly without filtering it through any, like this whole level of belief and paradigm. And a lot of those beliefs and paradigms are subconscious. We're not even aware that we have them. A lot of them are influenced by our culture as well. So we're not conscious of them either, of the ways in which we're affected by our culture. One example of this is deconstructing patriarchal systems. So, for example, internalized misogyny. We don't realize how, like for me, myself as a woman, I will give an example for this. I went into a bank and I was asking about their stock trading online platform. And the woman I was talking to was female. In my mind, I automatically discredited her. And then I realized, oh wait, I recognize this woman. I went to business school with her. And I know that she worked full-time while doing full-time business school. So she's incredibly hardworking and obviously smart enough to pull that off. And then I felt really bad because in my mind, I had discredited her and would have considered her less qualified than if I had considered if a man was sitting in front of me. And so this is an example of where I realized I needed to deconstruct that internalized discrediting women within me. Not that I ever want to do that, but this was part of a paradigm and a system that I had been around and influenced by in ways that I wasn't aware of. So I was talking about how in September I started to see the reality around me differently and think, this is some bullshit. Like, what is this? Why would I continue to work hard to try to make stuff happen in my reality? Because this reality is bullshit. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care anymore. You know what? I just want to enjoy the peace and love and joy that I feel within myself. And I felt this extraordinary power to create. I felt, you know what? Within myself, I can go visit anywhere I want to. Right now, I can go to some beautiful beach, some beautiful island. I can go anywhere I want. Some snowy mountain. I love winter. I love skiing. I love cozying up by the fire. I can go to any place I want to within my imagination and be there right now. I don't need to try and work hard to create passive income to travel around the world. I can just be there right now. And I don't care about what this looks on the outside anymore for my life. I'm not going to think that I need to keep striving in this struggle way where I think I need to keep putting myself down for not being as far along in my life as I think I should be. No, I'm not doing this anymore. So I started to feel this extraordinary power within myself to create. So that started to really come online this past September. And also this awareness of myself as a spiritual being. I started to, not be as excited about what I could achieve on earth, and started to connect more with what I've learned about higher realms and higher dimensions. And I noticed the shift. I noticed where it felt more real to me. Otherwise, like, I've read some of Dolores Cannon's books and I was like, okay, that's interesting, that's cool. It felt separate from me. Now, at this point, it started to feel more in alignment with me, with my identity of who I felt that I was. So that was the shifting out of the identifying with the physical body and more identifying with the spiritual body, because I noticed, wow, in the past, in my mind, I had discredited a lot of what I've learned about spiritual things. Of course, I have a Christian background, which would naturally discredit anything that's outside of the paradigms of what the church teaches. And so there was that extra judgment there, but still I had only really identified with life after death to the point of wanting to escape my present circumstances. And now I'm in a place where, of course, there was those uncomfortable periods that I went through, but I was able to settle into, I'm okay with feeling this pain. I would rather feel this pain, feel what I'm feeling, than try to feel bad about what I'm feeling, to judge it, to escape it. I'd rather just feel here. I'm trying to escape that pain, that lines up with the achievement paradigm. I have to escape feeling what I'm feeling so that I can get back on this train, get back in this rat race that I'm imposing on myself in my life. And of course, I've been very achievement focused in my life, and this affects all of us at some level, this level of judgment. I'm not achieving enough. Of course, if you are in an individualistic society, that's going to affect you in a fairly significant way. So the last point here is that I started to notice an extraordinary power to create. I knew about manifestation. I'd listened to Abraham Hicks and really struggled. Listening to Abraham Hicks really helped me to tiptoe and just really inch myself towards being able to be okay with feeling good about myself and not constantly criticizing myself. I had this horrible mental chatter of constantly criticizing myself. So that took quite a long time to work through and deal with, and it was something that I wasn't even aware of. But I didn't fully understand this idea of manifestation. So, first step is feeling good. You have to allow yourself to feel good. Okay, maybe second step, you imagine something and it feels really, really good. Okay. Now, and then what comes up? Judgment. Oh, maybe limiting beliefs, right? And you don't recognize them as limiting beliefs because you say, yeah, that thought is true. You just assume it's true. You don't even realize you're assuming it's true because you haven't developed that level of awareness to realize and be able to look at your thoughts. But you say, oh, but it's not possible. I can't do that. And I shouldn't think about or imagine this thing that feels really good because whatever reason. So I've come back to that and I've thought, why? Why are you not allowing yourself to imagine something that makes you feel good? Oh, you have to be in touch with reality. The truth of it is probably that this is triggering some kind of pain, and this pain is revealing a limiting belief. And limiting beliefs can be really painful. So, for an example, for a limiting belief, we'll say, I'm not beautiful. I'm not valuable. I'm worthless. Right? Already. That's pretty brutal. That's painful. It's so painful to believe that you are not valuable, that you're worthless, that you have no inherent worth. And this is heartbreaking. This is really, really challenging to live your life like this. A lot of us live like this for years and years. So this is why when we imagine beautiful things that make us feel good, the limiting belief comes up, that pain comes up. No, that's not possible. No, I can't do this because I don't deserve it. Whatever thing it is, and it might not consciously come to mind. Like a lot of these things, they don't consciously come to mind. If you start to notice and develop your awareness, you can start to notice how you feel. And then you follow the breadcrumb trail. For me, I like to journal, so then maybe I'll come up with things that, oh, I'm feeling this, that if I translate that into words, I could say that it's this, like this is the limiting belief behind it. So through the spiritual awakening process, we've talked about how we've got transmuting pain, transmuting and changing these beliefs. So a lot of this comes from these limiting beliefs. These limiting beliefs formed to help us deal with the world that we live in. Our family, could be genetics as well, our society. They helped us to deal and survive. So when, let's say, a child, they are in a very extremely stressful environment. Now, instead of assign blame to their parents, who they require to survive, who they are reliant on to survive, they might internalize the blame towards themselves and say, my parents act like this because I'm a bad person. And this helps them to survive because the crushing weight of acknowledging the reality it can result in not having the will to live. It can be too much for that psyche. And so this, and then once you go into adulthood, you might have an expanded awareness, you might have more life experience where you can process that better. And so the pain comes up, and if you're willing to feel that pain, then you can feel through it, and you can reprocess that belief about yourself. So this can happen probably with children and then going into adults, but also at different levels of consciousness. So if you're not very aware, you might not have the awareness to be able to process a traumatic event, right? So as you grow, even in your adult life, there are things later in your adult life that you can be processing from earlier in your adult life. So it's not just the things you experienced as a child, especially if you have considerable spiritual growth. So this extraordinary power to create, because I was talking about Abraham Hicks and how I started to have an awareness of how I could use this to imagine things that, if I imagine them, they give me joy, they give me thankfulness. So for example, I thought, because I've been so anxious about, you know what, I want a place to live, I want to be able to have a family. You need a place to live, you need to be able to afford it, like all those kind of conveniences. And then looking at the current situation, wow, this is nearly impossible for me to be able to achieve. So I give up. What is wrong with me just imagining a scenario where I am already in the place I want to live and all the financial things are taken care of? Guess what? Fear comes up, anxiety comes up, this stress comes up, right? And I start to feel and see the limiting beliefs and paradigms. And so that's an increase in awareness where you are able to see, oh wow, so that's the limitation there. And the awareness comes online where you realize, oh my gosh, I can actually imagine and feel this incredible thing happening, and it can actually show up and it can happen. So your belief in yourself and your creative ability just shows up. So this is something that I've felt really start to show up in September, and I've been really working with this and trying to remind myself to work on this in a really intentional way throughout the beginning of October, because I didn't really have a lot of belief in myself or my ability to do this, and I would struggle with this. And it's amazing to be able to have this increase in awareness, because when you have an increase in awareness, you don't realize where you lacked awareness before, because you have to have your increase in awareness to realize, like, oh wow, I didn't see that before, you know, like, because how would you? So, and this is really all working together. Seeing the illusion of the world around you, detachment of the world to this seen reality, because if you're really attached to the world around you, you're attached to all the rules that keep it the way it is. If you're able to detach, you're able to release yourself from the rules. If I want to live in this place, then I need this amount of money, and I can't possibly have that amount of money, right? That's a rule, right? So part of the spiritual awakening is breaking free from these limiting beliefs and paradigms. Part of why this is scary is because we are conditioned to depend on community for survival. And this awareness is going to be scary for other people, because it's going to be, like what I said before, a kind of ego death. It's going to be a death of the current paradigms, the current reality. And if you have an attachment to it, you have a belief, if I just work hard, then I can get to where I want to be and feel happy, that has to collapse. It has to die. And you have to feel that within you. You actually have to go through that process where it feels like something is dying inside of you. And it does. It literally does. That has to die in order for all of this other extraordinary power to create and a belief in your ability to manifest and create, for that to show up, for you to attach, for you to, I don't want to say attach, but really for you to create new paradigms about your reality. Yes, this is possible. So whenever you imagine something and then it shows this limiting belief that comes up, then you realize this is my work here, to feel through this limiting belief, whatever shows up in my body, to feel comfortable. So before we were transmuting pain and healing pain, right? Once you've really gone through a lot of that transmuting and healing that pain, you're really, really good at processing emotions and sensations in the body. Okay, so now you're really working on limiting beliefs. You are leveling up. And limiting beliefs, they have that element of pain. They have that element of that uncomfortable sensation in the body. So you're doing the same thing, but now you're leveling yourself up. And I didn't realize just how many negative thoughts I would have all the time about my life, about people, about situations, about everything. And I was like, you know what, manifestation is not working. Actually, it's working. It's working. Yeah. And this is the process to be able to change that. And part of this is this detachment to your reality, because if you're detached, you realize it's okay. I don't need it to show up in my external reality. I'm going to just enjoy imagining it right here and right now in my internal reality. And I'm going to let whatever's happening outside of me happen. It's fine. It's okay. And I came to this point where I was like, you know what? I don't care if I have to feel this pain for the rest of my life. I'd rather feel it than be in denial of it, because that is authentic. Feeling and acknowledging what you're feeling, that is authenticity. You're being authentic to who you are. You are not what you're feeling, but you're being authentic to your experience. Okay, so I already touched on this, the shifts in consciousness, awareness of self as a spiritual being, releasing beliefs, rules about reality, fear, shame, blame, and anger. If we want to talk about your mission and purpose on earth, the most powerful thing you can do is process and feel through these emotions. Fear, shame, blame, anger. A lot of the problems that we have in our life, that we iteratively think about in our life, we loop in our mind, like, oh, I'm anxious about this problem happening. And then to avoid feeling the underlying feeling of what's there, you go to planning ways to avoid getting hurt, planning ways to keep yourself safe, instead of just actually feeling what's in your body. Because it's almost as if there's this part of you that thinks, I'm going to get hurt if I actually experience what I'm feeling. So this is the hardest thing. If you want to think about people who think they're super, super strong, they're terrified of this stuff, right? We think about people, we think, oh, this person's super, super strong. Yeah, well, most of them, everyone's terrified of this. It's scary. It's scary to feel through these feelings. Like, it's so intense. But this is really what we need to be able to do. As we're able to process emotion, we can experience more of the negative and more of the positive. And so instead of chasing happiness, you're avoiding feeling anything. You're avoiding feeling pain. You're avoiding feeling pleasure, because you're not okay with just feeling. So enjoyment of life really requires an acceptance of experiencing the intensity of life and being okay with that. As you get better and better with becoming a conduit of emotions, where you're just letting it flow through you instead of having all this resistance to what you're feeling. So emotions, and I also mean equivalently body sensations, because we feel emotions in the body. Often feel like the thoughts around the head, and then the emotions, they show up in the body. So this is the crux of incredible work that you can do, because this precedes transformation. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about twin flames now. So the label itself doesn't matter as much to me as the process of what it's describing. So twin flames, they say it's one soul split into two bodies, which in itself is very strange. But it creates this intensity of connection when meeting. So it creates this this intense experience. So both initially of oneness, of love, of connection, and then it triggers all the experience of duality, of this fear, this shame, this doubt, this disconnection, hurt, pain, suffering, lack. Triggers all of that in a very intense way. And what is consistent through what most people describe it as is this intense sexual energy and attraction to the other person, often with intense experiences of having intimacy with them on an energetic level. So it's not happening in the physical, but it's happening in a not exactly spiritual, but it's like intense sensations where it's almost as if it's more intense than a daydream, and it's experienced accompanied by these really intense feelings. And when I can compare this most closely to maybe a Kundalini awakening, and I've seen some videos where people say, yeah, this is what happens on the twin flame journey, this Kundalini awakening, where it is this process of sexual transmutation. And also with the twin flames, for example, New World All-Star, Awaken with Pradnya, and Kat from Sacred Soul Rising, they all agree that the primary purpose of twin flames is this spiritual awakening process. You obviously don't need to be a twin flame to have a spiritual awakening process. This can be triggered by various different things, but the purpose and the intent is the same. So you could be experiencing this by yourself without having a twin flame or identifying as that. So whether you are or not, for me, that's not important. One of the interesting things is this intense sexual energy. So why this is interesting to me is that sexual energy is life force, and it's this incredible power, and we have really demonized it in our society, made it a bad thing, because it is an feeling in the body. It is a sensation in the body. And guess what? What's scary? Sensations in the body, emotions. We don't want to feel that. We don't want to feel the intensity and the depth of life experience, so we avoid it. And I think that's part of why there is this demonization of sexual energy in our society. So there's this intense attraction, this intense sexual energy. And what I think this serves the purpose of is this purpose of purification. It provides the fuel for the fire for this purification. And because it's so intense, people who before weren't interested in spiritually awakening, they weren't pursuing it, it forces them into this process. And it's really an incredible process. And one of the things that stands out is this: because I have such a strong attraction to this person, that means I'm destined to be with them. So there can be this level of destiny. You can talk about soul contracts. Sure, you can have that, but we always have a choice. And I think part of this comes from a lack paradigm, where you think, I don't think that I'm ever going to meet anyone else that I feel this intense connection and love with. But the truth is that connection, that love is always available to you within yourself. And as long as you have that connection and love within yourself, you're living within that space, according to the law of attraction, you're going to attract someone else who is in that space as well. If we think about it, if you've done this work of purification, this intense spiritual work, you've purified yourself, you've been on this journey, then someone who hasn't done that work, who hasn't purified themselves, like, you have this beautiful light within you. If someone doesn't have that light within them, you do not belong together. You can, regardless of whether this is your twin flame or not. And that's why it's about the spiritual journey, right? If you grow on this spiritual journey and you become this beautiful vessel of light and love, and you don't belong together. So they would actually have to change and become that vessel of light and love to match you. And thinking like, oh, there's only one person who could ever make me feel this. This is a limitation. This is a limited paradigm. Because if you release that paradigm of lack, you enter the paradigm. I could meet many people that I can feel an intense connection with, a beautiful, intense connection with, because that's really what we're interested. If we're honest here, we want to feel the love, we want to feel the passion, we want to feel all of it, but there's that limiting belief there, and there's that attachment to lack. And that's the sneaky way that it shows up. And so that's why I think the sexual energy plays such an important role, because most people would give up if it weren't for that, because it pushes you forward on it. It creates this agony where, as long as you hold on, like, if you think about it like this, a lot of our paradigms and beliefs we have such a strong attachment to, and we can't change them just by like deciding, like, I'm changing this belief, right? Often we don't have the capacity to change that belief until we're transformed from within, which we can have the intention to do. But there is this kind of process that happens to us where it transforms us, and then we are able to just be in this different state where we're able to see through that lack and that limitation, where don't have this like strong, like tightly fisted attachment to it. And a lot of that is that transmuting those emotions and that pain. So, and that's part of the beauty of this intense sexual energy. It's really going to get you to be banging your head against the wall, because as these beliefs come up, and it is that fire and energy which burns through those lack, limitations, and limiting beliefs. I haven't mentioned this so far. I should have probably mentioned this earlier. What I'm talking about is my own experience. So I've watched different videos on this, but I'm also talking from primarily my own experience because, spiritual knowledge on its own isn't particularly useful unless it's relevant to your life. And so this is why this has been relevant for me. And I've been through the process of wondering if I'm a twin flame and being kind of enamored with this idea of this special relationship, but then identifying it as a romantic relationship when it's not about that at all. The attachment to wanting this special kind of relationship was a desire to avoid feeling and purging and transforming the pain that I felt within me. And it felt like mountains of pain, like it felt like it would never end. It's gotten a lot better though. I mean, it's gotten incredible and amazing. I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned, it might be a slide that's coming up. I'll save that thought as to how this has transformed for me. Like I feel so much better now than I did a year ago, or even more so like a couple of years ago. Definitely a lot of stuff that was coming up that was really painful. But of course, I've gotten a lot better at processing those emotions. I said I wasn't going to take longer than usual, but it's already been close to my normal time. But I'll get through all the ideas I wanted to share before I wrap this up. So, I had some experiences with two different guys where there was this intense energy that I felt between us, and I was like, are we twin flames? And one of them triggered a lot, like I didn't really interact with them that much, and they triggered a lot of this obsession and a lot of stuff that I had to just work through and process. The other guy, I tried to get to talk to him and like talk things through, and it didn't go well. I also didn't have the maturity to deal with it well, and after that experience I was like, you know what, I'm not really gonna try. If I experience this again, I'm not gonna try and get validation from the other person. I'm just gonna work through it within myself. So then October 25th last year, so it's been almost a year now, I showed up to work and I saw there was a coworker that I'd never met in person. Like I'd seen them online, but this was the first time that I'd met them in person. And I felt throughout the day, I sat beside them and I felt this intense attraction towards them, like grow and build throughout the day. And it was really, really intense. And so for the next couple of weeks, I dealt with this really intense attraction and this like almost like anxiety, like heart racing and not being able to sleep. And it was just this really intense. And I knew, you know what, I've dealt with this kind of experience before, maybe not at this level where I felt this like feels like an anxiety. But I was like, you know what, it'll pass. And I just have to work through it. Over the next couple of months, like it felt like this agony, this level of obsession and attraction and this argument within my mind. Like I feel so attracted to this person, and so therefore they must be my destined partner. But it doesn't make sense for me to even date this person. So that continued and resulted in a couple months later, I had this really transcendent experience. I had this really strong desire to not have to deal with this anymore because it was really distracting in my life, like this constant obsession and these thoughts. And so I had this transcendent experience. And then after that, I gradually was able to process this and get used to it. So this continued to be a struggle because this is someone that I worked with. So they would constantly bring this up within me, and there was always this struggle. So that brings me to this year in September, where I started to feel this really intense energy, and then working through it, like the negative energy, working through it and experiencing this intense peace and joy and love and this surrender to this process that doesn't make sense. So I can feel, so I've been feeling that the sexual energy that burns through you, it is this process of where a lot of insecurities and judgments and limiting beliefs and paradigms that were not serving me were brought up and triggered within me. And so I've been forced to work through this process, and I recognize that this has been a gift. It's been a struggle, but it's been a gift because this has been transforming me and really pushing me forward on this process of spiritual awakening. So that's really been, like, I've been in so much resistance towards it, but now I'm really starting to have appreciation for it and recognize that I don't need to end up with this person, especially if they don't embody the values and qualities that I would want in a partner, that I would be able to meet someone, because as I develop and embody that light within me, then I would be able to meet someone who has those qualities that I embody as well. And so it would be a match. And there's no limitation that I could only ever feel this incredible feeling with this one person, that I could feel it just within myself, by myself, but I could feel it with other people as well. And this is, it's a subtle, but it's a really important realization that truly the truth is that we are not lacking or limited, but this attachment to these paradigms that tell us we are is the limitation itself. And it's really a process of growing through that. And of course, you know, the Kundalini awakening, it happens for people who don't identify as twin flames as well. So that's what I mean when I say, like, these processes of spiritual awakening, the purification, this, you know, the use of sexual energy to heal yourself, to really create this beautiful light within you. A lot of these things, they can happen regardless of how a spiritual awakening is triggered within you. And that's what this slide says here. Yeah, so this whole process is about discovering greater peace, joy, and love. And so the benefit of this is really your development of your power to create, to manifest, and the realization of your power to do that, and to the belief that you have in yourself. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I don't see any questions in the chat or any comments from anyone, and I'll probably be doing more videos on, working on creating your reality and manifesting and really just enjoying your life, really starting to recognize ways where you can bring yourself into greater freedom, into less judgment. So part of what I didn't talk a lot about was going from like the 3D to 5D consciousness, but the root of that really was moving out of fear and judgment and lack and limitation and separation and into this unity consciousness, into love, into joy, into peace. And part of that is just finding more and more reasons to just live in a state of love and peace and joy. Okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Ravina, for joining me. And I hope that was helpful. Yeah, so I feel this sense of what is coming, and it's almost as if like I can't see. It feels like, what else could I possibly say? There's this sense of, wow, like I've arrived, but of course I know that, there's so many more arrivals that we can go to, and we're just exploring and jumping into this new awareness and new discovery of what our life can be and what is possible for us. Always great to join these talks. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So there will, hopefully be more of them than what there has been lately. And I look forward to having more of them with you. Bye.